Shut up and sit down.
Hello guys, this is Andy from Bigmeks Workshop and Painting Studio, and today I'm painting the plastic Eldar Farseer from G-Dub. It's if anyone's done any of the single pose plastics, they're really well detailed and I really enjoyed painting this. So I'm straight into it. I know I'm using the airbrush, don't use it a lot for this video. I'm using Vallejo's German Red Brown as the prime for the cloak. And I'm going to do a little bit of the ghost tint, which you've seen in some of our other videos, just to add a little bit of a pattern to the cloak and make it look a bit more interesting. The inside of his robe, I'm using good old Vallejo's black, just as a base coat. That's going to really add to the colour transitions of the cloak itself, and really set the centre away from his coat. So, as in the ghost tinting vids, I used a very thin Vallejo grey blue, just putting a bit of a flame pattern along the bottom edge of his cloak, which I will then colour in with a few small thin layers of grey, blue and white. It just adds a little bit of interesting detail to the bottom of the cloak, but you don't have to be too accurate with this, as you're going to be painting over it with the reds. It just makes it look a bit more interesting, and it means you can have a little bit of fun with the cloak, just in a different way to what you would normally do. And as you can see, I'm just using the whites to really bring out that flame pattern. Now you can leave it at this and have it as just a flame pattern along the bottom edge, which would have looked pretty interesting and really stand out against the dark reds for the robe. But I decided I wanted to ghost it up a bit because I was in a bit of a groove doing the ghost tint on a couple of videos. So after getting the flame effect around the bottom edge, I then went over the entirety of the centre of the fig with Tamiya Mascol to protect the centre of the fig from any overspray from the airbrush. The airbrush was then gone straight onto the lower regions of the cloak, back with the original red. Kept the layer really thin. I wanted to be able to see the cloak, see the flame pattern, but not over much. I wanted it to still be quite subtle. Once I'd got a thin layer on, I started highlighting the cloak with the airbrush using Vallejo's red from Vallejo Air. This was pretty much the top highlight I actually went for. I did some edges later, but I tried to keep the cloak looking really dark, a really nice rich red colour. So as you can see, obviously I'm focused towards more of the higher regions. I'm still trying to be careful over the flame effects, because well, otherwise what's the point in doing it if you can't see it? Okay, now I'm working on the Reef Bone in the centre, and I'm using GW's Carrick Stone, GW's Carrick Stone as the first layer. As with all paints, you've heard us all say, you've heard all the tutorials will say keep your paints thin. It took me 2 or 3 layers to get a nice smooth coat onto the centre of the Reef Bone. And once I'd got a nice coverage, I then went off and did a very thin wash of Reetland Flesh, just to add a touch of depth and richness to the Reef Bone look. Whilst I was waiting for that to dry, I then went back and all the spirit stones I blacked out. It's an important part of the process to get the extra details based with some level of prime colour. This makes all your other layers consistent and makes you have a better finish in the long run. Once I'd done all that, straight back onto the Reef Bone with Shabty Bone, by GW, and with the paint being ever so thin, I was able to really spread the colour out, whilst leaving the darker colours towards the edges, allowing for that sort of blended look. Now, it's a very time-consuming process when you're using such thin layers, so you have to be patient. Which I will admit, I'm not the most patient people at times. I do like to get things done, but it really did pay off for this. I took a fair while, a load of thin layers working on that Reef Bone. Again, the next layer up was Screaming Skull by GW. I do like them three colours, but they work really well together, and I recommend them to anybody. But they do take a little bit more thinner or water to get them to the right consistency, as GW paints tend to be quite thick. The highlights were then focused towards the centre again, even more so, keeping them white spots real gentle and faint. Really adds a lot to the detail work. And now I'm using Vallejo's Ivory, which goes as a great highlighted colour for any bone look. Again, incredibly thin paint. It took 3 or 4 layers to get the highlights where I wanted them and to the level I wanted them. The white sections, they were very thinly washed with a blue. Now you could use Dragonoff Nightshade or Vallejo Army Painter's blue ink. They're both about the same sort of colour, so you can get away with either. And I used a couple of layers of that on there. The satchels were painted as a base with Rhinox hide, as was all the leather work. It's a nice go-to colour for any kind of sort of rich leather effect you want. And I just kept it towards all the strings and the satchels, working them regions, for want of a better term. So I couldn't decide what I wanted to do with a hand. A lot of people paint it up as a glove. I decided I was going to paint it as a hand, ungloved. Don't know if that's the right thing to do, I'm not sure, but it looked different. So I started off with the Vallejo's flesh colour, which was applied very thinly to get a couple of good layers on it. I'm now back onto the Reef Bone whilst all that's drying with white. I don't know which brand I use. It's just a random white I've picked up over the years.
Off-white.
Yeah, it could be the off-white at this point. I might have done an extra highlight on there. As always, back on the flesh, Reekland Flesh Shade. Can't go wrong with that one. I really like that tone. It really works well for a whole lot of things. Nice on browns as well. And a good quality wash. Couple of layers just to get the flesh tones looking right. Then back to the cloak. I'm starting to add some yellow to the edges, just to bring them final highlights up on the upper reaches of the cloak, just to finally make it stand out a little bit more. Sometimes people could say less is more, sometimes it's not the case. I just felt like it just needed a little bit more work, just to bring them points to a real bright colour. I'm only really working on the edges, and I'm mixing fiery orange with the red, bringing it up to a yellow eventually, working only on the real fine points, just to add that definition to the cloak. Gives it a really good effect, and it really makes it stand out. As you can see, I'm just adding a touch of pure fire orange now, really adding that, really adding them extra layers in. Again, this has got to be done really carefully. You don't want to use really thin paint, and start away from the edge where you want to be, and pull the paint towards the points where the paint will pull as such when it dries, and it'll give you a real nice blended point. Back onto the flesh, I'm now using a mix of Vallejo's light flesh with the Model Air flesh tone. I tend to use a light flesh on females, but it works really well for Eldar. Their outfits are generally very vague, so a lot of the time it's difficult to tell whether they're male or female. But it doesn't really matter, as I imagine them being a slightly lighter skin tone to a human anyway. So it really makes them stand out, make them look sort of alien. The white sections was done with the pale grey blue by Vallejo model colour. And this was essentially just bringing the sash to a white finish. To be fair, I could have probably done this slightly better. Well, a lot better, to be honest. I didn't get it to look the way I wanted it to, and I'm not totally happy with the sash. Although the colours I picked out was right, I think my highlights were a little bit sloppy at this point, and I couldn't get the positioning of the paint where I wanted them. I'm not quite sure why. I was just having a bit of a bad moment there. Adding a touch of the ivory to the light flesh tone. I started adding some point highlights to the flesh, just bringing out the fingers, really making the knuckles and the areas where the skin was slightly more stretched a bit brighter, a bit more, bringing it out to a bit more of a pronounced point. It really made the hand look good. And do the same on the extended hand as well, even on the inside. It's very important to remember to paint the inside of a hand if it's open. Even the inside of a hand like that would have the light hit it, and you just got to remember to put it in a direction what would look natural. So here we are. The hands are more or less done. Obviously I need to do the brass, the metal work around the hands to get them to finish off that look. And it looks like I'm doing a very final layer of the Reegland flesh shade. Now this is incredibly thin. It just adds a little bit of definition to the imperfections in the skin. Really makes takes, because there's a lot of detail in this fig, a lot of interesting creases, especially in the hands. So putting a thin wash on there really allows it to pick up the detail. So back to the Rhinox hide now. I've added a touch of dry hard bark to the Rhinox hide, and I'm bringing the straps up along that dry hard bark rope. It's just to add a different colour to the straps. The the satchels were highlighted with the same but slightly stronger mix. Keep them on the same colour spectrum, but I wanted them to look a little bit brighter, a little bit more weathered. So onto the black now. Highlighting black can be difficult, I'm not going to lie. it's very difficult to get the right colours. So you've just got to work with what you've got. I use Vallejo's model colour black grey, which is a real dark grey. It stands out quite a hell of a lot on the camera under the lighting. So what I had to do even then, even using such a dark grey, was to use Northern Oil to bring the colour back to a black rather than a rich grey colour, and took several layers of alternating between the Northern Oil and the black grey to get the shades where I wanted them. So again, it's all down to patience. You need to take your time, think about what you're doing, and enjoy it. Once the black grey had been dried, I then go over with GW's Eshin Grey, which is a nice dark grey still, but it works as a nice highlight towards the upper areas of the blacks. Obviously, as is traditional, we've dropped it on camera, so you've got to remember that is a quite important part of the fig, just to make sure you drop it. You don't want to feel lonely like all the rest of the figures. Everything's got to be dropped at least once. So I'm using Administerium Grey now over the top as a sort of almost a top highlight, but I do go one higher with the Dawnstone. Making sure that the paint is, obviously as always, it's very thin. You've got to build them layers up. With black is such an unforgiving colour to paint. It's very difficult to get smooth highlights without having to return back to the wash to bring the highlights together. You've got otherwise it just looks like a grey piece of cloth. And I'm doing the same on the faceplate. I decided I wanted the faceplate to be black as well, just to make it stand out against the rest of the red and the bright colours. So now moving on to the gems. The Spirit Stones were based with extra opaque Vallejo dark green, is that correct, Dodge? What's the extra opaque one called? Yeah, it's extra opaque dark green. It's the darkest green we've got. Same sort of shade as Dark Angel's green, and it's along the same shade as the Dark Angel's green colours. Once I'd got a nice smooth finish of that, the next layer was essentially a highlight, but we paint our gems reverse, so it was actually a low light as such, with Vallejo's Sick Green, and that was painted on the lower half of the fig, of the gems. Well, how that looks, what that does, it makes it look like the light is shining through the gemstone itself. Once that's been done, we then do the lower third of the gems is done in moot green, which really adds a nice bright shine to the under edges of the gemstone. And then I start adding a touch of yellow, an off yellow green colour. Can't remember the name of it. Into the mix, just to bring them lower highlights down. Once that's been done, you go back with a very thin, your thinnest brush you've got, with any kind of white, and you just do a single bright white dot at the top where the light would catch the shine of a gem. It really makes that gem go and look like it's being hit by light from above. And there we have it. I didn't do a video of the painting the spear. I had to actually strip it part way through as I wasn't happy with the colours. But that's how I painted what my representation of a Siam Eldar Farseer went. Now I do hope you enjoyed this vid and found it instructional. I thoroughly enjoyed this figure and will recommend anyone who enjoys painting to pick one up and have a crack. Now hopefully you like what you see and want to see more of the same. If you want to see us, hit like, hit subscribe, share with your friends, and I will catch you in the next one. Take care guys.